The warning shot. The stars had never seemed so cold to Admiral Sarah Chen as she stood on the observation deck of the TCS Defiance, watching the alien fleet approach through the viewport. 27 ships of unknown design moved in perfect formation, their hulls gleaming with an otherworldly shimmer that spoke of technology far beyond anything humanity had ever seen. After 300 years of exploring the galaxy alone, first contact had finally come to them. Sarah adjusted her uniform and checked her reflection in the polished metal beside the viewport. At 45, she had earned every line on her face, through years of commanding deep space operations. Her black hair was pulled back in a regulation bun, and her dark eyes held the steady gaze of someone who had seen too much to be easily intimidated. The Terran Coalition had chosen her to lead this historic moment, and she would not let them down. The communication array crackled to life, and Lieutenant Commander James Rodriguez appeared on the main screen behind her. His usually calm demeanor showed cracks of tension as he reported the latest sensor readings. The alien fleet had stopped just outside weapons range, but their energy signatures were unlike anything in the Coalition database. "Admiral, they're broadcasting on multiple frequencies," Rodriguez announced, his voice carrying across the bridge. "Our linguistics team thinks they've figured out the basic structure of their language. They're calling themselves the HFY Empire, and they want to speak with whoever's in charge." Sarah nodded and made her way to the command chair. The bridge crew moved with practiced efficiency around her, their faces showing the same mixture of excitement and apprehension that she felt. This was the moment humanity had dreamed of since the first telescopes had pointed toward the stars. They were no longer alone in the universe. The main screen flickered, and suddenly an alien face appeared before them. The being was tall and graceful, with elongated features and skin that seemed to shift between silver and gold. Its eyes were large and multifaceted, like those of an insect, and when it spoke, its voice carried an undertone of barely concealed contempt. "I am High Commander Zethkri of the HFY Empire," the alien announced, its words translated by the ship's computer with a slight delay. "You will identify yourselves and explain your presence in this sector. These star systems fall under Imperial claim, and unauthorized species are not permitted to establish colonies here." Sarah stood slowly, her hands clasped behind her back in a gesture of controlled authority. She had practiced this moment in her mind countless times, but the reality was far different from any simulation. The weight of representing all of humanity pressed down on her shoulders like a physical force. "I am Admiral Sarah Chen of the Terran Coalition," she replied, her voice steady and clear. "We are humans, and we have established colonies in this region over the past 50 years. We had no knowledge of your claims, as this is our first contact with your species. Perhaps we can discuss this situation and find a mutually beneficial solution." High Commander Zethkri's multifaceted eyes seemed to focus on her with something approaching amusement. The alien leaned back in what appeared to be a command throne, its long fingers drumming against the armrests with a rhythm that suggested boredom rather than concern. "Humans," Zethkri repeated, as if tasting the word. "Your species is unknown to us, which means you are primitive. The Empire has cataloged over 10,000 sentient species across the galaxy, and those we have not encountered are invariably backward scavengers clinging to the edges of civilized space. You will abandon these systems immediately, or face the consequences." The bridge fell silent except for the hum of life support systems. Sarah felt the eyes of her crew upon her, waiting for her response. In the background, she could hear the soft beeping of sensors as they continued to analyze the alien fleet. 27 ships against humanity's finest vessel, but numbers were not everything. "High Commander," Sarah said, her voice taking on a harder edge. "We are not scavengers and we are not primitive. We are a sovereign species with the right to exist in this galaxy. Our colonies support millions of people who have made their homes here. We cannot simply abandon them." Zethkri's expression shifted to what might have been surprise, though it was difficult to read alien features. The High Commander leaned forward slightly, and Sarah could see other figures moving in the background of the transmission. The bridge of the alien vessel was vast and filled with technology that seemed to pulse with its own inner light. "You dare to refuse an Imperial command?" Zethkri asked, its voice rising in pitch. No species has ever successfully resisted the Empire. We have conquered star systems that span half the galaxy. We have reduced entire civilizations to ash. What makes you think your pathetic little colonies can stand against us?" Sarah took a step closer to the screen, her jaw set in determination. Behind her, she could hear Rodriguez quietly coordinating with the other ships in the human fleet. They had 9 vessels in total, including the Defiance, but each one was crewed by men and women who had volunteered to explore the unknown reaches of space. They were not soldiers in the traditional sense, but they were survivors. "Because," Sarah said, her voice carrying clearly across the bridge, "you don't know what you're dealing with. We humans have a saying, High Commander, don't push us. We've survived ice ages, plagues, wars, and the vacuum of space itself. We've built cities on dead worlds and turned deserts into gardens. We don't back down from bullies no matter how big they think they are." The transmission flickered, and for a moment Sarah thought the connection had been lost. Then Zethkri's face reappeared, but now the alien's expression had changed completely. The contempt was still there, but it was now mixed with something that looked like genuine anger. "Very well, Primitive," Zethkri said, its voice now carrying a tone of cold finality. "You have chosen extinction over wisdom. The Empire will demonstrate why 10,000 species kneel before us. Your colonies will burn, your ships will be scattered like dust, and your people will learn the price of defying the HFY Empire." The transmission ended, leaving the bridge in darkness except for the glow of instrument panels. Sarah stood perfectly still for a moment, processing what had just happened. First contact with an alien species, and it had ended with a declaration of war. The weight of responsibility threatened to crush her, but she pushed the feeling aside. There would be time for regret later if there was a later. "All ships battle stations," she ordered, her voice carrying clearly through the comm system. "This is not a drill. Send immediate messages to all colonies in the sector. They need to begin evacuation procedures now, and get me a direct line to Earth Command. They need to know what's coming." Lieutenant Commander Rodriguez appeared at her side, his face grim but determined. "Admiral, our ships are good, but we're facing technology we don't understand. What are our orders?" Sarah looked out the viewport at the alien fleet, which was beginning to move into attack formation. Their ships were beautiful in a way that spoke of advanced engineering and artistic sensibility, but beauty would not save them from human determination. She thought of the mining families on Kepler Station, the research teams on New Sahara, the children who had been born among the stars and knew no other home. "We hold the line," she said simply. "Whatever it takes, we hold the line. And we show them that humanity doesn't go quietly into the night." The next few hours passed in a blur of activity as the human fleet prepared for battle. The Defiance was an exploration vessel, not a warship, but her crew had adapted her systems with the same ingenuity that had carried humanity to the stars. Mining lasers were recalibrated as weapons, cargo bay doors were reinforced as improvised armor, and the ship's powerful engines were pushed to their limits. Captain Elena Vasquez of the TCS Explorer reported that her ship's scientific sensors had detected weaknesses in the alien hull designs. The HFY vessels were built for intimidation and overwhelming firepower, but they seemed to lack the redundant systems that human engineers built into every ship. Dr. Michael Park, the fleet's chief scientist, had identified what appeared to be critical power nodes that, if damaged, could cripple entire sections of the enemy vessels. As the alien fleet moved closer, Sarah could see the details of their construction. The ships were massive, some nearly twice the size of the Defiance, and they moved with a grace that suggested advanced propulsion systems. Energy readings spiked as weapon ports opened along their hulls, revealing arrays of devices that could only be described as terrifying in their potential for destruction. "They're targeting our lead ships," Rodriguez reported, his hands flying over his console as he coordinated defensive maneuvers. "Energy buildup suggests they're preparing to fire some kind of plasma weapon. I'm reading temperatures that would vaporize our hull plating." Sarah nodded, her mind racing through possibilities. The aliens had superior technology in numbers, but they also had something else that might prove to be a weakness. They had contempt for humanity, which meant they might underestimate what desperate people could accomplish. All ships, implement Plan Alpha, she ordered. Remember, we're not trying to win a stand-up fight. We're trying to survive long enough to show them we're not helpless prey. The first alien weapons fire lit up the darkness of space, like artificial stars, and Sarah Chen prepared to show the HFY Empire exactly what it meant to push humanity too far. The price of arrogance. The Battle of Kepler Station began with a light show that could be seen from 3 star systems away. The HFY Empire's plasma cannons fired in perfect synchronization, sending streams of superheated energy across the void toward the human fleet. The shots were precise, calculated, and absolutely devastating to empty space as the human ships scattered like leaves in a hurricane. Admiral Sarah Chen gripped the arms of her command chair as the TCS Defiance rolled hard to starboard, its hull groaning under the stress of emergency maneuvers. Around her, the bridge crew worked with desperate efficiency, their faces illuminated by the red glow of combat lighting. The alien fleet had expected to find sitting targets, but humanity had other plans. Direct hit on the HFY flagship's port weapon array, reported Captain Marcus Torres from the TCS Ranger over the comm system. His voice carried the satisfaction of a man who had just landed an impossible shot. Their shields are down 15%. These fancy aliens aren't as tough as they look. Marcus Torres had been born on a mining station in the asteroid belt, where surviving meant learning to fight dirty and think fast. He was younger than Sarah, barely 35, but he had more combat experience than anyone else in the fleet. The Terran Coalition had sent him to the frontier specifically because he understood how to win when the odds were against you. The Ranger was the smallest ship in the human fleet, barely larger than a heavy fighter, but Marcus had turned her into a weapon that defied all conventional wisdom. He had stripped out the luxury quarters and replaced them with additional engines. The cargo holds now contained improvised missile launchers built from mining equipment. Even the ship's communication array had been modified to emit focused electromagnetic pulses that could disrupt alien sensors. "How did you get through their defenses?" Sarah asked, genuinely curious despite the chaos around them. The HFY ships were supposed to have impenetrable shields, according to every sensor reading they had taken. Marcus's laugh came through the comm system, tinged with the wild excitement of a man who had just discovered something wonderful. "Turns out their shields are designed to stop energy weapons and kinetic projectiles, Admiral. But they don't know what to do with a mining charge that's been modified to emit a resonance frequency that matches their hull plating. The explosion doesn't have to get through the shield if it can make the ship shake itself apart from the inside." Sarah felt a smile tug at the corners of her mouth despite the desperate situation. This was humanity at its finest, taking the impossible and making it work through sheer stubborn creativity. The aliens had technology that was centuries ahead of human science, but they had never faced an enemy that could turn their own advantages against them. "All ships, focus fire on the lead vessel," she ordered. "Use Marcus's resonance technique. If we can take out their command ship, the rest might break formation." The human fleet moved like a pack of wolves, each ship taking advantage of the other's attacks to strike at exposed positions. The TCS Explorer, commanded by Captain Elena Vasquez, had been converted into a mobile laboratory, and her crew of scientists had been busy analyzing every piece of data they could gather about HFY technology. "Admiral, we've identified a critical flaw in their power distribution system," Dr. Michael Park reported over the comm. His excitement was palpable even through the static of combat communications. "Their ships are incredibly efficient, but they route all power through central nodes. If we can hit those nodes with enough force, we can cause cascade failures throughout their entire vessel." The information was passed to every ship in the fleet, and suddenly the tide of battle began to shift. The HFY had expected to face primitives with crude weapons, but instead they found themselves fighting an enemy that could analyze their technology in real time and adapt to exploit its weaknesses. High Commander Zeth Kree's face appeared on the main screen, but now the alien's perfect composure was cracking. The multifaceted eyes that had shown only contempt now reflected something that might have been fear. Behind the High Commander, the bridge of the HFY flagship was filled with smoke and the flashing lights of emergency systems. "Impossible," Zeth Kree said, its translated voice carrying a note of disbelief. Your weapons are primitive. Your ships are barely capable of interstellar travel. How are you penetrating our defenses? Sarah stood from her command chair, her uniform singed from a power conduit that had overloaded during the last attack. Her face was streaked with sweat and soot, but her eyes burned with determination. Around her, the bridge crew continued their work, their hands steady despite the chaos. "Because you made a mistake, High Commander," she said, her voice cutting through the noise of battle. "You assumed that advanced technology makes you superior, but technology is just a tool. What matters is the mind that uses it and the will to keep fighting when everything seems hopeless." The transmission flickered as another human attack struck the Kethvar flagship. This time it was the TCS Pioneer, commanded by Captain David Kim, who had discovered that the aliens' communication systems could be hacked using modified medical scanners. The attack didn't cause physical damage, but it filled the Kethvar ship's data networks with feedback loops that caused their targeting systems to malfunction. "You're making us angry, High Commander," Sarah continued, her voice growing harder. "And you really don't want to make humanity angry. We're the species that looked at the deepest ocean and decided to go swimming. We're the ones who saw the, highest mountain and decided to climb it. We looked at the emptiness between the stars and decided to make it our home." The battle raged for hours, with neither side able to claim a decisive victory. The Kethvar ships were larger and more powerful, but the human vessels were faster and more adaptable. Every time the aliens thought they had found a way to counter human tactics, the humans would change their approach completely. Captain Torres had turned his ship into a mobile weapons platform, using the Ranger's small size to dart between larger vessels and plant explosive charges on their hulls. Captain Vasquez had rigged the Explorer's scientific equipment to emit sensor ghosts that made it appear as if the human fleet was twice as large as it actually was. Captain Kim had turned his medical bay into a cyber warfare center, sending viruses through the Kethvar communication networks that caused their ships to fire on each other. But it was the crew of the TCS Defiance who made the decisive move. Dr. Sarah Mitchell, the ship's chief engineer, had been studying the wreckage of a Kethvar fighter that had been disabled in the early fighting. She discovered that the aliens' power systems were based on a crystalline matrix that could be overloaded by specific electromagnetic frequencies. "Admiral, I think I can turn their own weapons against them," Dr. Mitchell reported, her voice tight with excitement. "If we can get close enough to their flagship, I can use our communication array to broadcast a signal that will cause their power crystals to resonate at their destruction frequency. It'll be like setting off a bomb inside their own ship." Sarah looked at the tactical display where the battle continued to rage. The human fleet had lost 2 ships, the TCS Endeavor and the TCS Pathfinder, but they had managed to destroy or disable 7 of the Kethvar vessels. It was a ratio that would have been impossible against any conventional enemy, but the aliens' contempt for humanity had made them predictable. "How close do we need to get?" Sarah asked, though she already suspected the answer. "Close enough that their weapons will tear us apart if we fail," Dr. Mitchell replied honestly. "But if we succeed, we'll take their flagship and probably half their fleet with us." Sarah looked around the bridge at her crew, these men and women who had volunteered to explore the unknown reaches of space. They had families back on Earth, dreams of discovery, hopes for the future. She was asking them to sacrifice all of that for a desperate gamble. Lieutenant Commander Rodriguez caught her eye and nodded slightly. Around the bridge, other crew members were making the same gesture of acceptance. They understood what was being asked of them, and they were willing to pay the price. "All ships, this is Admiral Chen," Sarah said, her voice carrying clearly through the fleet communication system. "We're going to make a final run at the Kethvar flagship. Our job is to show them that humanity cannot be intimidated, cannot be conquered, and will never surrender. Whatever happens next, make sure the galaxy remembers that we were here." The TCS Defiance turned toward the massive alien vessel, her engines straining to provide maximum acceleration. Behind her, the rest of the human fleet followed, each ship committed to the desperate gamble that would either save their colonies or ensure that their sacrifice was remembered. The Kethvar flagship loomed ahead, its hull scarred by battle, damaged but still bristling with weapon ports. Energy readings spiked as the alien ship prepared to fire everything it had at the approaching human vessel. In the final seconds before impact, Sarah could see High Commander Zethkri's face on the screen, the alien's expression showing the first hint of respect for the species it had so casually dismissed. The electromagnetic pulse from the Defiance's communication array struck the Kethvar flagship like the hand of an angry god, and space lit up with the fury of a dying star. When the light faded, the once mighty Imperial vessel was nothing but expanding debris, and the surviving Kethvar ships were already turning to flee. Admiral Sarah Chen stood on the bridge of her damaged but victorious ship, watching the alien fleet retreat into the darkness between the stars. The colonies were safe, humanity had survived its first interstellar war, and the galaxy had learned a valuable lesson about underestimating the species that had crawled up from the gravity well of a small blue world. The warning had been given, and the price had been paid. The Kethvar Empire would not forget the day they pushed humanity too far.